Welcome to another exciting episode of our Way of BJJ podcast. In today's conversation, we dive into the BJJ journey of a well-known figure in the online instructional space, Stephan Kesting. Not only is he a seasoned teacher, but he also holds a unique title, the inventor of the Heelhook. Listen to the episode to find out why. To explore more of his expertise, make sure to visit his website at grapplearts.com. And as a special treat for our listeners, we have organized some of Stephan's valuable YouTube content into the Way of BJJ app. You can gain free access to these resources by downloading the app today. Now, let's jump into the conversation with Stephan Kesting.
I like this. I like the background, Jim, too.
I know. Yeah, because I know you're really big into the fitness aspect of things as well, right? Yeah. Good. So, I do want to get one thing straight. I was listening to some of the podcasts you did previously, right? So, is it Stephan or is it Stephan?
I'll answer to anything. If you wanted to get really particular, the German pronunciation would be Stephan.
Stephan? Oh.
But I'll go with Stephan.
Okay. So I guess the person trying to say Stephan is trying to pronounce it more.
Yeah, that's more the French way.
Right. Oh, okay.
Stephan's fine.
Stephan is fine. Yeah.
Or hey you.
Hey you. Yeah. What's up, dude? Yeah, that's the going joke, right? I mean, you train with so many people in jiu-jitsu, then you forget their names, so you just go, hey, what's up, bro?
Yeah,
what's up,
exactly.
bro? That's it. Everybody's a bro.
Slap, bump, and bro.
Yeah, that's it. Well, thank you for coming all the way out here to Way of BJJ. So I'm excited to have you on the podcast. So as I said off camera, right? The disclaimer for my guests is always, once I hit record, then anything goes. So so if there's anything you say that causes you to get canceled, that's on you. I got nothing to do with it. I have enough trouble controlling what I say myself, So
Not a problem.
Nice. Yeah. So So I do want to ask you, because I think there's a few really interesting things that I want to ask you personally, right?
Sure.
Because the reason why I'm doing this podcast is not for you guys, no, it's for my own curiosity and benefit. So
It is a great benefit of having a podcast, is that it's an excuse to talk to people that you wanted to talk to anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have, I started my own podcast because I was having these awesome conversations with people, and I wish I could have shared some of them. Mm-hmm. Now I can record it, and if it's a crap conversation, I don't have to share it. But if it's a good one, if it's one of those that you wanted to keep, you can then go share it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because from my perspective, what might seem like crap to you might be very interesting to somebody else, right? Because I've done 38, 39 episodes so far. Some episodes, man, I don't feel like this went well whatsoever. And then you'll see people giving me comments or sending me messages like, "Yo, man, that was great. Really enjoyed that episode." I'm like, okay, I guess it's really not up to me to decide. Yeah, so that's why I release everything. Yeah. So we'll come back to the podcast. But let's first of all, can you just tell me briefly about your martial art and jiu-jitsu background? I mean, how did you get started? What were you doing before you found jiu-jitsu?
So I was born in 1969, which meant that I was alive during the martial arts craze of the 70s. Mm. So in the 70s, I was pretty sure I wanted to be at first a Kung Fu master and then a ninja master. Mm. That was, I guess, late 70s, early 80s. And I could not convince my mom to let me train either in Kung Fu or ninjutsu.
She did not see the value in that.
No, despite my arguing. But I was allowed to start doing judo. So the judo was like a distant 5th, 6th, 7th choice.
Yeah, it's just not nearly as cool.
Not as cool. Bruce Lee was not doing judo. No. Actually, he was doing judo, but I didn't know that. As a 10-year-old kid, I didn't know that. So I got a lot out of judo as a kid. And I trained with Frank Hatashita, who was quite a famous judoka in Canada, based out of Toronto. Mm-hmm. And I still have this sense memory of walking up these stairs while the judo class is going on, and you hear the thudding of people hitting the mats, and you hear the heavy breathing, and that smell of people basically sweating and working out. And it's funny how that I can still smell that, I can still taste it, I can still hear it, feel it. 40 years later. Mm. So I did that for a bunch of years. Then I finally got old enough to start doing Kung Fu, doing the real martial arts. and trained in a variety of styles of Kung Fu, did some JKD concepts with a guy called Makoto Kabayama, trained in Kajikembo and Filipino martial arts, a little bit of some other arts with Philip Gelina in Montreal. And that was right around the time when the Gracie in Action tapes came out. And I remember a guy coming to train with us. He stayed at my place, and he had these, like an actual VHS tape that he'd ordered, probably for $300 from Jorge and Gracie in Action 1. And we watched it, and we watched it a second time. And it illustrated the importance of ground fighting, right? We kind of trained a proto-MMA system with Kajikembo. Didn't have that much free sparring. Had some free sparring, but of course you stopped when it went to the ground. There were techniques you would do on the ground, but you wouldn't spar it. And this is a pretty convincing illustration that there's something going on here on the ground, and that if you don't know what you're doing, you're completely hooped. So we started trying to recreate this. And we're very lucky that our instructor was okay with it. So we had a guy who'd done a bit of judo, me, some guys who'd done a bit of wrestling, some guys who'd done some classical Japanese jiu-jitsu systems, a little bit of shoot wrestling coming in from the Inosanto Academy through Dan Inosanto, and just experimenting with it. I mean, at the time I had long hair, I had giant, long, curly hair down on my shoulders.
Do you have pictures?
I have pictures, there are pictures.
Nice.
Not enough, unfortunately. But at the time, we were trying to do single finger locks. We were fish hooking. We were hair pulling. I'd come home after training and just wads of hair would fall out in the shower. We hadn't really realized what are sustainable ways of training and what are not sustainable ways of training. And really, that's one of the geniuses of jiu-jitsu, is that it's a more sustainable way of training than I would argue many other systems of martial arts, which is not to say it's without its own hazards, but
Of course.
and then eventually got back into judo, found a jiu-jitsu instructor, my first jiu-jitsu instructor. Shout out to Przemek Dobczynski, who's now in, I believe, Orange County. He was a blue belt, and blue belts were in such demand back in the day that he would come into town from another city 2 days a week and teach 2 days a week, and that was enough for him to have a separate gym that he would only teach at 2 days a week.
Wow.
And then eventually that became more. And so it was this long journey, starting I guess with Kung Fu,
Right.
going to judo because that was the only thing that was available, doing all these other things, some of which I still do a little bit of, but eventually making my way back to pseudo judo or jiu-jitsu.
Right.
I mean, there are differences, but grappling is grappling.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Well, I mean, you know what they say, BJJ is basically just judo, you know?
It is. One significant thing that makes jiu-jitsu different, and I think Robert Drysdale has argued this quite effectively, is the rule system.
Right.
Because the rules drive the evolution of the sport. If we change the rules of Major League Baseball to say, a home run is still a point, and getting back to home plate is still a point, but so is stealing a base. If you steal a base, you automatically get a point. That would completely change the game. It would change the strategies. It would change how it's expressed. It would change how fast the game is played. So when Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu changed its rules to be more ground-oriented, where they stopped saying, okay, a judo throw is an ippon and the match is over. You throw me, I land flat on my back, make a big loud noise, and you win. That's a pretty important rule for shaping how to win. If now we say, you throw me, that's 2 points, but now I can put you in my guard and I can sweep you and that's 2 points, and now you can pass my guard and now you can win, that's going to change how people train. That's going to change how people compete. That's going to change the techniques that you use.
Yeah.
So yes, judo and jiu-jitsu are basically the same thing, but there's a reason why it feels different to train with a jiu-jitsu guy than it does when you train with a judo guy. Like a judo guy, you only have to pin for 15, 20, 25 seconds to start getting points and win the match. And that's why they got these killer holds, like, and not too much emphasis on submission, except maybe against Turtle. It's just people within that game trying to win that game. And we're in the jiu-jitsu game with our own set of rules, trying to win our way.
Right.
I would make an argument that our way is maybe a little bit more conducive to self-defense. Not maybe, definitely more friendly on the body, because takedowns are bloody dangerous.
Right. Because I heard you say in one interview that out of all the surgeries you had, most of them were from judo. And then you didn't, and comparatively, you trained way less judo than compared to jiu-jitsu. Right?
3 surgeries on this arm, nerve damage in this hand,
Jeez.
2 surgeries in this foot. Foot's okay. Possible, my hip replacement is maybe heavily contributed to by judo, just getting thrown again and again and again. So that's 5 surgeries, or maybe 5.5. And if you look at me, one of my eyes is lower in my head. And that's the eye that was caved through the floor of the orbital bone while doing judo.
Right.
And like I said, I've done way more jiu-jitsu. Not to say I haven't gotten injured in jiu-jitsu. I've had lots of injuries from jiu-jitsu. And I'm sure over a long enough time span, I'll have a jiu-jitsu surgery as well. But throwing is beautiful. Throwing is super important for self-defense. If you want to compete in Abu Dhabi, ADCC rules, you probably have to know takedowns. If you want to fight MMA, you definitely have to know takedowns.
Yeah.
But if you're a recreational player, I think there's a pretty strong argument for either really minimizing takedowns or not doing them at all. And that's heresy. And now we're kind of back to jiu-jitsu kata. Takedown number 1. Pop elbows up, level change, shoot in, takedown. And if you're not training it live, you're unlikely to be very good at it. But maybe a little bit of knowledge that you're not very good at is still better than no knowledge. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's a tragedy of judo and to some extent
That's
wrestling.
okay. I think we can come back to this as well, because I think at the end of the day, it's just, I do want to pick your brain on, like, is it really worth it to, for older guys or people training into their 50s and 60s and 70s, like what are the benefits, pros and cons for doing this versus the potential injuries? Because again, we're not trying to dissuade you guys from training jiu-jitsu, right? Having said all that, right? It's just like, but we do want to present the potential risks and all the information, and people can make their own decisions. They all have to travel their own journeys, right? So, but I think I do want to go back a little bit, because it sounded like the way you said about your martial arts journey, right? Judo, kung fu, and then watching Gracie in action, it all sounded very smooth and everything, right? But did you ever have all those internal conflicts about, like, hey, oh man, I invested all this time in training kung fu, and now all of a sudden, this looks way more effective, I should be doing that? Or are you the type of people that just goes, hey, you know what? I'm just the seeker of the truth. And then I have no internal conflicts whatsoever. I'm just
There's definitely internal conflict.
Yeah.
There's definitely, and it's the sunk cost fallacy. Man, I've put in 5 years of my life training Hungar. And now I've also learned, Fukian White Crane, a little bit of Northern Shaolin. And now I really just want to train jiu-jitsu. But what about all this stuff? It takes a while, and major course corrections in life are difficult. I thought I wanted to become a physicist. I went to university to study physics. After 1 year of physics, I realized I hated physics. And I went and studied biology instead, got a couple degrees in it. But as you pointed out, I told that story in 10 seconds. The truth is there was a lot of gut-wrenching, soul-questioning, dark night of the soul there, trying to figure out, oh, man, I've been so fixated on this one goal, because I thought I was going to be a physicist ever since I was 7 years old, 8 years old. And now here I am 10 years later in university, and I hate it. Or I spent years and years and years and many hours in a horse stance training Kung Fu under the promise that eventually this stuff would start working.
Right.
That is I realize there are people who train Kung Fu who do more sparring and do more pressure testing, and good for them, that's great. It's funny how that always ends up looking like MMA at the end. It's this convergent evolution phenomenon that happens. But the promise is stick with this long enough. The traditional martial art promise, one of them, is stick with this long enough and it will suddenly start working. And if somebody jumps out at you, you'll be able to magically pull this off. And I think that's mostly bullshit. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And so, yeah, I don't think it was easy to make that transition. And I mean, if you want something to work, you can't learn to swim on dry land. If you know how to swim, you might be able to do some conditioning for swimming on dry land, but you're not going to learn to swim on dry land.
Yeah. So were you converted right away when you saw those tapes, or were you like some
No, I was trying to do both, trying to ride two horses.
Or were you like some other people like, hey, you know what, I have to go and test myself against a competent jiu-jitsu practitioner just to see if it works or not?
Not
or
really.
Did you intuitively knew
It was
that?
pretty self-evident. And once we started training it, even if you're training with friends in a garage, if you live out in 150 Mile House, you're so far away, you really just need 2 or 3 people and some mats. That is the beauty of it. And you can pretty quickly figure out what works and what doesn't. And you can feel it. Like this whole, I'm just going to stand. Yes, you can just stand up. Yes, there are MMA fighters who are very good at standing up out of the ground, getting back to their feet. But that's a hard skill to learn. And more importantly, that skill can only be learned by training it against resistance, by really trying to stand up against a wall when somebody's really trying to hold you down. So I think in those early days, we felt it pretty quick. Like it's not easy at all to stand up when somebody's holding you down. And if they know what you're doing, if they know what they're doing and you don't, you're dead in the water. Yes, I think it was. We held these truths to be self-evident after a bit of experience.
Right. Yeah. So once you decided to switch to training jiu-jitsu, was that it? Did you ever go back to training other martial arts?
I still. I mean, I love things like boxing and kickboxing. I can't do them that much now. I don't want to make this all about my medical ailments, but I did have a kidney transplant back in 2015. So instead of having 2 healthy kidneys in a well-protected part of the body, I have 1 donor kidney that's in a rather exposed part of the body. So that's it. It's just 100% not worth the chance of taking a hard shot to the kidney and having to have another, getting on a waiting list, doing dialysis.
Right. Yeah.
That's
sounds like a nightmare.
That is a nightmare. And I'm very fortunate to have come back as strong and as healthy as I did. I attribute luck. I attribute, my brother, because I got a matching kidney. I also attribute having trained really quite hard for years. So being in a decent physical condition. Many people who go through something like that are in a terrible physical condition to start with. And now they have kidney failure. And now they went from 10 out of 100 to -20.
Yeah.
So I was starting at a pretty decent level. And then I think also the martial arts training just taught the grinding mentality, right? If you're working on your reverse punch, you're not expecting to master that in one class. If I want to beat you and every time we roll, you leg lock me, man, I'm going to fucking beat you. But I recognize it's not going to probably be one class that I'm going to go and learn something and then be able to apply it. It's going to take a process. I'm going to have to, first I'm going to have to learn, what are these leg locks? What are these leg lock positions? How do I heel slip? How do I toe slip? How do I get out of this? What is heel slipping? What is toe slipping? What are the counters? It's going to be a process. It's going to be a grind. Things don't come overnight. And getting back in shape after a kidney transplant, getting back in shape after a hip replacement, getting back in shape after yet another surgery. It's like, well, you know what you have to do. It's going to be ugly, but you just plod away at it. So in that sense, the martial arts training really helps develop a resilience and a perseverance. I don't think that martial arts training makes you a better person, but it does make you tougher. I don't think martial arts training teaches you necessarily better morals. You and I both know lots of people in this space who have terrible morals. But it does make you more confident. It does make you tougher. It does improve your ability to persevere. It does improve your ability to grind. And that has tremendous carryover in the rest of your life.
Yeah, for sure. Well said. Well said. Yeah. So by the time you found jiu-jitsu, how old were you at that time?
Mid-20s.
Mid-20s.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what year was it?
Depends what you define as starting jiu-jitsu. In a certain sense, I count rolling around on the ground, pulling each other's hair, and trying to recreate what was happening in the Gracie in Action tapes as starting jiu-jitsu. I count doing judo at clubs that had a very strong emphasis on the ground, on the newaza, as doing jiu-jitsu. In terms of formally starting jiu-jitsu, I think it was 93 or 94.
Oh, wow.
So I got my black belt in 2006. So by skin of my teeth, because it was New Year's Eve that I was awarded it. I was awarded it, and it's like, oh, thank God I got it today, because otherwise it would have been 2007.
Right.
All my one of my main training partners, Vlado, had got it the day before, and I knew that if I didn't get it on New Year's Eve, if I got it New Year's Day, he would forever hold it against me that he'd gotten his black belt a year before.
A year before, even though it was only a couple days apart. Yeah.
The BJJ math.
Right. Yeah. I know we're not the brightest tool, it's the sharpest tool in the shed, so to speak.
I think you can be too dumb to do jiu-jitsu. I think generally speaking, jiu-jitsu attracts reasonably intelligent. Like, there's amazing how many engineers practice this.
True.
And in a way that, I think you can be pretty dumb and still do boxing. Not to say that there isn't intelligent boxing, but if you just want to stand and bang, you can do that with two neurons and one synapse. Jiu-jitsu, there's a whole lot of moving parts. Of course, this is chauvinism on my part.
That is true.
I'm a jiu-jitsu chauvinist.
I know it is pretty cerebral, but I mean, we just like to play dumb, so so we fly under the radar a little bit. Yeah. So because since you started jiu-jitsu back in the 90s, right? I started like 2008, so that was so that's already like, I can't even do the math. 15 years after you started.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So, I guess you would be the best person to ask them, because we're talking about how judo and traditional jiu-jitsu has a lot of similarities and all that kind of stuff. But do you think we're starting to see, like, with the advent of modern, quote unquote jiu-jitsu, that it's actually starting to look like a different sport?
Yes, it's continuously evolving, but it has been evolving for some time.
Right.
There isn't this mythical, beautiful jiu-jitsu of the past that's unchanged, and now it's corrupted. That's like a golden age fallacy argument, right? Once upon a time, men were men and women were women, and fruits fell from the trees, and no, people were shitty back then, and people are shitty now. If you take a look at, well, the earliest, you can see old judo videos, well, old judo film that's now on YouTube from the 1920s and 1930s. And it doesn't look a lot like modern judo. I mean, yeah, you can see that they're doing the same throw, but for just one huge difference is if you watch Olympic judo now, it's grip fighting, grip fighting, grip fighting, grip fighting, grip fighting, grip fighting. I get my grip, I throw. Whereas back in the day, they would come out and they would lapel and sleeve and go. So if you take a look at early jiu-jitsu videos, a good example there is Helio Gracie versus Kato, the guy that he had to fight in order to fight Kimura. There's footage of it. If you take any random 10 seconds of that match, the odds are very good it's going to look a lot like a judo match. There's very little groundwork in that match. Helio's trying to throw Kato. Kato goofs around for a while, and then Uchimata, I think it's an Uchimata, Uchimata's Helio into the ground, and I think does it a couple of times, and then ends up in the guard and gets choked. So clearly the conception of what perfect jiu-jitsu was back then is more or less like judo with an emphasis on guard work.
Right.
I'm oversimplifying. By the time that you start changing the rule sets, as we talked about right at the beginning, the expression of the art starts changing. By the time you get to the 70s, and by the time you get Carlson Gracie, not only changing what is taught, but changing to who he teaches it, and opening it up, and like, hey, you're not a Gracie, your last name isn't Gracie? No problem. come, I'll show you everything, and we're just going to have a big room of people trying to murder each other, as opposed to learning a specific set of steps, practicing that, and then maybe doing a tiny bit of free rolling at the end. Basically, I'm oversimplifying, there was a ton of free rolling and a bunch of murderers, row guys trying to murder each other. And that's where you ended up with the many of the first really successful MMA fighters, the Fabio Gurgels, he trained with Carlson for his, was it Pride? Anyhow, when he fought Mark Kerr. The Amri Batesh's, the Mario Sperry's, that entire generation. By the time I was training, there was certain techniques that would be illegal now were still totally legal. I remember trying to win a tournament with a neck crank. I didn't quite get it. My instructor had promised a free month of training if anyone could pull off this neck crank that he had shown, kind of from knee mount, kind of like a Stocks neck crank from knee mount. And I remember going for it, and I missed it by a little bit. I still won the match, but I lost it. I didn't get it, that neck crank. So that would be illegal now.
So I guess a neck injury is karma.
Yeah. But even then it was evolving because in large part because of the everything evolves, but then we get to the YouTube era and we get to the VHS tape era and we get to the DVD era, and then the evolution goes crazy. The rate of change increases so much once. If you come out and you catch me in some weird takedown or some weird flying guard pass to arm lock, you figure out how to do a flying guard pass to full Nelson submission in one move. And you do that on me today. Tomorrow, somebody's going to be tonight, somebody's going to be practicing that at the gym. Tomorrow, if it's a big event, 1,000 people are going to be practicing. Hey, did you see what Kesting got caught with? So it's harder to keep secrets. And the arms race in terms of somebody developing something to counter that, something to counter the counter, is speeding up tremendously. And that's aided and abetted by the proliferation of digital information, both in the form of instructionals, video footage of people sparring, video footage of people competing. So is it evolving? For sure. Is it evolving in a way, in a bad way? I don't think so. I think there's actually more submissions now in most rule sets than there were back in the day. Back in this supposedly mythical golden era.
Right. Yeah, because I think the thing that I've been seeing lately, it's almost like the argument that jiu-jitsu doesn't work for in a street fight is coming back, right?
Yeah.
You know, right? It's kind of like how we were perceiving kung fu almost, right?
There is there's a grain of truth there, and that you can go win under some rule sets with almost no escapes, no takedowns. EBI, hypothetically, if I had amazing stalling skills and I was really good at escaping the armbar and finishing the armbar and finishing the rear naked choke and escaping the figure four triangle, body triangle, I could win and have no other skills. That's an extreme example. I'm cherry picking to make my case here.
Right. And it was actually on full display in the last Medusa BJJ event, right? So this black belt was fighting a blue belt. The blue belt had her back the entire round, regulations, and just trying to choke her, but her defense is so good, waited until overtime, and then the black belt was able to armbar and get the victory, right? So, you see that.
Yes. I think by and large, the positive effects of training against, let's just take the most ridiculous case. For self-defense, I'm 100%, I don't ever train self-defense in this argument. For jiu-jitsu competition, my whole game is based on De La Riva guard and reverse De La Riva guard, kiss of the dragon underneath, and then getting to the back and controlling somebody and winning by a couple of points. Let's take this as my hypothetical A game. Because I'm doing this against resistance all the time, I'm going to argue that that's more effective for self-defense than somebody who trains for self-defense only, but doesn't do it against live resistance. Obviously, the most effective would be training it, with punches and strikes and with a focus on self-defense and live resistance. But if you're separating this out into two worlds, one in which there's no live resistance and one in which there is, I don't think there's, the odds of the guy who has never or doesn't very frequently put it against live resistance versus somebody who's going live resistance all the time, I'm going to put my money on the guy who's going against live resistance. So I'm not saying that you would want to pull De La Riva guard in a street fight.
If it works, it works.
But there people pulled off barambolos in MMA.
Yeah.
People have pulled off crab rides in MMA.
Yeah, I think I actually saw like an Instagram footage of like some high school fight, and then and then this one jiu-jitsu teenager actually did a berimbolo to the back and choked the other guy out.
I've not seen this. Mine was in it. I'd love to send me that clip after.
I'll try to find it, but I could be just remember it wrong. But I swear to God, I saw something like that though. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the key, the magic's, the secret sauce, the magic pixie dust is training against resistance. And if you are interested in self-defense, and you probably should be, it's pretty easy to calibrate your game. Here's how. Every 6 months, maybe a little bit more, maybe every 3 months, put on some light MMA gloves and do jiu-jitsu with light striking to the head. Your entire game will instantly change and adapt, and you'll find out that overhook that you previously only thought was good for setting up your triangle choke is actually pretty good at stopping the guy from punching you in the face. You'll learn that that knee shield, which you were previously using to stop the guy from doing a pressure guard pass on you, is actually pretty good at stopping the guy from punching you in the head. And you'll learn that, mount is good for something else other than setting up the arm bar.
Nice.
So I think it's pretty easy to, a little bit of, you can even create rules around it, right? Okay.
So you do think the combat jiu-jitsu is a good rule set then?
I don't like the slapping as much. I think training against punching is better. I've actually not trained combat jiu-jitsu. I've never tried with that with that palm heel striking, but I have done a fair amount with gloves, either with the gi or without the gi.
But
way easier with the gi.
Do you think even with the palm strike, it would keep jiu-jitsu
Maybe keep it honest?
Yeah, keep it honest a little bit.
Yeah. I think so, but I'm speaking outside my area because I've not trained it. It might. I think if you were to use it in self-defense or in MMA, the guy's going to be punching you. So you might as well. Now that means that if you and I are training, we need to train with somebody sane, and we need to not try and punch the guy's nose through the back of his skull. And that really means that it's on the instructor to like, hey, calm the hell down. Like, okay, go with somebody else.
Right.
You're not allowed to go that hard because, some aggro guy will try to,
Yeah, because I actually think you might have a point there, because I was watching the combat jiu-jitsu, the middleweight tournament that just happened like a couple weeks ago. So the guy who ended up winning the entire thing, he threw the least amount of strikes, right? He barely threw anything, right? He was actually waiting for the other people to do the slaps, and then using them off balancing themselves because they were trying to strike and then get into position for submissions.
I'm not sure he would have had the same luck with that strategy against punches.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. So I don't want to pontificate on something that I haven't experienced and haven't researched. But I think, a little bit of that keeps your jiu-jitsu honest. And honestly, especially if you do gi, it's a ton of fun. Like, you don't think spider guard is effective for the street? Man, if I'm wearing this, you're wearing that, this isn't going to be a pretty spider guard, but this will still be enough to stop you from hitting me 3 or 4 times.
Right, before it rips.
Before it rips.
Yeah.
But maybe that's enough for me to sweep you. But even if that's 3 or 4 punches less that I eat, I'll take it. And if I'm wearing this North Face hoodie here. Pretty good construction. You could hold me in this for quite a long time.
Yeah, thank God for their quality.
Yeah. If you've never trained with light gloves and a sane training partner in the gi, training jiu-jitsu, including punches, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, sweet. So let's move from training jiu-jitsu, these are all great discussions right here. And I do want to kind of, talk about how do you find that balance of, because you are you have had like a full-time profession throughout your jiu-jitsu and martial arts career, right? So do you prioritize your martial art first, or do you prioritize your career first?
I'm fortunate in that I haven't had to choose. I'm a firefighter, so they're long shifts, but it's a condensed work week. So then another huge advantage of that is that if if it's not a busy day, or if it's a quiet time of a busy day, and we've done all the other jobs that we have to do, there are usually fitness facilities at the halls. So you can get that box checked, right? You can get your cardio, you can get your basic lifting. It's not enough if you were going to, I don't know, compete as a professional bodybuilder or a CrossFit athlete, but for regular people who would, getting a couple of conditioning sessions in every week, that's pretty good if they're also doing another sport. So
Are you allowed to lay down some mats at the fire hall and then just
in
get punched?
theory, we're supposed to avoid contact sports.
Oh, right.
In reality, there's definitely been some mats that have been laid out, or a tarp stretched on grass. That's a pretty handy trick if you take a tarp and plastic pegs and you peg it out on grass in the summer,
Right.
especially if it's out of the way. Yeah, there's definitely been some rolling. I mean, when I started as a firefighter back in '99, I was the only guy in the department. And I think there were 2 or 3 other firefighters in the Lower Mainland, and I knew them all by name because we all trained together. And now there's 20, 30 guys who currently train, and probably more who's trained and then stopped. So it's no longer, you're no longer the man-hugging freak.
Right. And I'm actually willing to bet there's going to be some firefighters, they only became a firefighter because that allows them to train jiu-jitsu more. Probably.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the skill set's pretty transferable. I mean, if you can stay calm under pressure, somebody's driving into you cross face and they're smothering you with your lapel or their mother's milk submission or some awful thing, and you can stay calm and you can work your way out of it. That's not a bad stress test for, this is a pretty bad situation here in this burning building. We can't go out the way that we came in. What do we do now? In terms of not panicking, I'm not saying that every firefighter who does jiu-jitsu is a good firefighter, but it's not a bad selection process. It also goes against the narrative that to be a firefighter, you have to be a team sport guy, because I've never been a team sport guy. Right? There's this narrative that you can only work effectively in a team if you've worked in a team sport. I think it helps. It's a handy skill to have, but I don't think it's a prerequisite.
So I have got to say then, being a firefighter must be so chill, and you have so much free time because you're doing so much. Right? You have your podcast, you're creating content, you have your jiu-jitsu.
I think mostly I've
courses
been
and
at it for a
everything.
long time, and there's a lot of stuff I don't do. Right? I don't drink at all, so that's a couple nights a week and subsequent days of hangover that I don't have. In order to get good at anything, you have to not do other things. So my life's pretty pared down to the if we count all aspects of grapple arts with the podcast and as one aspect, there's the outdoor stuff that I like doing, and there's family, and that's about it. And there's work, right? So there are 168 hours in a week. Even if you're working 40 hours a week, I think firefighting works out to on average 42 hours at the fire hall a week. That's still, and even if you're sleeping for 8 hours a night, there's still quite a few hours left over.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So when did you, how did you get into doing the jiu-jitsu instructional and the apps and everything? I mean, how did that come about?
Oh, that was a slow process. I was trying to remember the year, early 2000s. A friend of mine got a VHS camera. This is a great big camera that looks like something a news crew would be carrying.
Then you have to put a VHS
You
tape
put a
in there?
giant VHS tape in it, and he was the bomb. He had this, and I'd been playing with some ideas about attacking the turtle. And I had an embryonic grand unified theory of attacking the turtle. I wish I could find the tape because it had some good ideas in it. And we filmed it in the rec room of his condo. And I made a VHS tape and I sent it to a bunch of my friends. And some of them were like, this is pretty good. Like, you should make this and sell this. Who am I?
It's like the N1 mixtapes, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in the day.
Exactly. But I thought about it, and it was a pretty good reaction to that. And also at the time, the level of instructionals was so low.
There were probably barely any out there, right?
There weren't very many.
Yeah.
They were very expensive, and also they were completely like, here's a tech, my Joe Schmo's Secrets of Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, here's a cross choke from mount. Okay, next technique. You start in the guard and you put him in a lasso. That was too early. You do a hip bump sweep. Next technique, you, I don't know, clinch against a overhand right.
So pretty much you still have to figure everything out. You just kind of get a visual cue of what's happening.
Yeah.
Right?
Also,
So not much better than those Gracie in action tapes then.
Gracie in action tapes were the best tapes of their day, and they weren't very good. Weren't very good. They were the best. It's passing judgment on somebody from a modern lens. They were the highest quality tapes. I mean, there were people who would film 10 techniques. Then they'd show a technique, and then they'd show it from the other angle, and they'd show it from the other angle, and they'd show it from the angle. So now they've shown it 4 times, and then I shit you not, they would take it in slow motion and show it from each of those 4 angles while the guy is talking. And they'd bundle it together for $400. So I think it's just, maybe it's my science background, or maybe it's just how I'm wired. It's like, no, we can do better than this. And I'm not an expert at everything, but at the time I'd spend a ton of time on the omoplata. It was a technique that resonated with me. So the first instructional I ever released was called Omoplata in the Dynamic Guard. It was a 2-hour VHS cassettes. And for the time, I think they were pretty damn good because it was organized. It's like, here's the basic ways to get into this technique. Here's what you can expect your opponent to do. Here's what you can do. I recently redid this series because in the intervening 20 years, I've learned more about the omoplata. Plus, I can film it at high quality.
Right.
And there's some pedagogical improvements, like some ways to improve the teaching of it as opposed to just the technique of it. So that came out as Omoplata 2.0, which I'm pretty happy with. I just saw that there was, like, I'm not a huge name. I've won some local tournaments. I've won some tournaments in the States. But, at some point, other people are putting out tapes that they've never won anything. So why not? And it's really, was that saying that people underestimate what they can get done in a day and overestimate what they can get done in a day and underestimate what they can get done in a year?
Right.
Well, when you've been doing something for 20 years, you end up with a pretty large body of work. So, I mean, the site, Grapple Arts, is pretty big. There's a ton of articles and tips, and there's a ton of material there. The YouTube channel is also pretty big now. I mean, it's become a much more crowded space, as anybody with a phone can upload videos, and many of them do. So it's more competitive now, which is fair. So I try to up my game as well. So then it's an arms race again in terms of teaching methodology, in terms of entertainment value, and in terms of training methods. I think that's really one of the big frontiers, because more or less all the techniques are out there. So now how do you actualize them? I know you've had Rob Bernacki on your show before. So I've worked with him to produce that BJJ Games instructional. And the main idea there is as opposed to sparring everything. Okay, we're going to start, and I'm going to pull guard, and you're going to pass my guard, and I'm going to re-guard, and then you're going to pass it again, take my back, and I'm going to escape, and then you're going to catch me in an arm bar, and I'm going to fight out of the arm, otherwise known as a sparring session. If we just take aspects of that and focus on that, we can get really good at it. So you kind of like have a home position. This is what I was doing yesterday. I was focusing on armbar escapes and turning that into a game. It's also, we were isolating the Kimura as a control position. And I think by isolating this and going deep in one very specific area, of course you're still doing generalized sparring, but by having various areas where you feel very much at home in, it's like a useful pit stop when you're rolling and there's all this chaos, like, oh, okay, here we are. I'm very comfortable here. Let's see what you got. And every other time I've been training this position, I've been limiting myself. Now it's full sparring. Now I don't have to limit my choice of options. So.
Yeah, gotcha. So do you think that's the, because when I talk to a lot of intermediate or beginner or even higher level, jiu-jitsu players, right? One common issue that I hear over and over is that they say they spend so much money on buying instructionals, John Danaher this, Gordon Ryan that, right? But then they end up.
Those are also very expensive instructionals.
Yes, and it's great instructional, hours and hours of content. But when I talk to them, I'm like, hey, have you watched the instructional through? He's like, no. Every time I try to watch it through, I fall asleep, or I will watch it watch it through, but nothing really gets stuck in my head, and I can't actually do them during a sparring session, right? So why do you think that is, and what are some of the what can they do instead to maximize it?
It's bad training methods. To some extent, is it the instructor's fault? In a class setting, I think it is somewhat the instructor's fault. If you're putting out tapes, DVDs, instructionals, there are things that you can do. So I'm not saying that I produced a perfect instructional, but something that
you're trying.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
It's like, if you remember nothing else other than this, remember this. I mean, they have to have actually watched that instructional in order to get to me saying, if you remember only this, remember this. But also having sort of, if you're practicing a new system of side mount escapes, and you watch video 1 in a series, and you go and you try it and it works for you, you're much more likely to watch video 2, because now you've got some momentum going, and now you're excited, and now you've had some positive feedback. Hey, I watched this, I tried it, and it worked, and now you're empowered, and now you're going to go back and watch more. So I think this idea of having like a quick start method within whatever you're teaching, whether it's an instructional, whether it's in a class format, try and give the people some quick wins to suck them in and to make them feel like they can actually perform what it is. So say you're teaching the triangle choke. Yes, you can teach all the mechanics of the triangle choke, and you should at some point. But we should also be looking at competition and personal experience and saying, what are the highest percentage triangle choke entries? What are the ones that we see the most often, again and again and again? And I've not done this. I've done this for other positions, but I imagine that a triangle choke from an overhook in closed guard would be a pretty high percentage. So then you teach the highest percentage stuff first, and under the assumption that it will empower that person will feel empowered because they'll hit it a few times, and then developing specific games and training methods to make them feel comfortable at the various stages in there. One classic way would be, can they control the position even if they're not applying the full choke?
So that makes a lot of sense. So what I'm hearing, what you're saying is that, so again, you have to organize the material in a way that's easy for people to reference back to the exact points that they're having that success, right? Because I think the problem with those 8-hour instructional is like people tend to want to watch through it because it's almost like reading a book, right? It's hard to kind of jump from chapter to chapter. They want to watch it sequentially, right? And it's hard to stop.
It's too much.
Yeah, it's hard to stop. Like, okay, you know what? This is the information I need. I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna go try it and get
more like
get
a
that win,
cookbook.
right?
You don't read a cookbook through from beginning to end. If it's properly organized, it can be like a reference material, Or like a cookbook. What do I feel like making tonight?
Yeah.
Noodles?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's
I'll go to
almost
the noodle section.
yeah. So it almost sounds like instructional should be organized in a way where again you give those high percentage instant wins they can do right away, and then recommend a training method that they can go and apply it right away, and then go to the next section. Is that
Yeah, I think the linking of
yeah.
training methods. I mean, I think there's a lot of role for experimentation because your best training method might be different from my best training method.
True.
Maybe you're a very visual learner. I know this has been debunked a little bit, this visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learner. But I still think it's, uh, I'm loath to throw the baby out with the bathwater on that one because I think there are different learning styles. And maybe you need to feel how your posture is being broken in the triangle choke, to pick an example. Whereas I need to understand, have somebody explain to me, oh, no, okay, you're going to underhook here, or you're going to underhook here, and you're going to turn the angle. And the reason it's hard to lift the person's because he's not right in front of you, he's off to the side. So now it's like trying to do a deadlift off to the side of your knee. Okay, that was a good explanation for me. Might not be the best explanation for you, which puts the onus on an instructor always to, it's tough to be an instructor because you're trying to find the best way to teach Jim and Sally and Joe and Biff, and they're all going to learn differently.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So it's almost like the way that the information is presented needs to be a bit more interactive then, right? So because it's hard to, let's say, remember when they used to have those books like Eddie Bravo's, rubber guard books and stuff, right? I used to try to train with those, right? And then you're like, you had your partner there, then you're kind of flipping through the book, like, and then it just doesn't work that well, right? So, I mean, with the, then it's almost like the same thing now when people go onto the websites or whatever. Again, you're basically watching videos and try to figure things out, right? So
well, some people are pretty good at seeing things visually and translating them physically.
yeah, but do you feel like there could be better ways to organize the stuff or using technology to make it easier for people to to present information for and make it more actionable for people when they train?
Yeah, maybe it's something I'm thinking about. I don't have firm answers yet, other than that we should be trying to incorporate more when you're teaching a technique, if you can break it down and find ways to gamify the individual steps and to be able to train individual parts of it in isolation before you put it all together and ask somebody to go out. There's always going to be the one freak who can just watch something once, do it one time, and then go pull it off in sparring. Those people are amazing.
That's
Those
the Gordon Ryan right there.
They don't really need our help.
Yeah, they could train with anybody, then they're going to be world champions, right?
Yeah. And so really we're trying to teach people who are not super physically gifted athletes and mentally gifted as well to be able to retain thousands of techniques. Some people can. I can't.
Yeah, and can you elaborate on the idea of the home base thing you were talking about just now, like when you're training the gamifying things that you're going constantly going back to the home base or whatnot?
But in that context, the home base is just a position defined pretty broadly as something where you're comfortable in, right? For a long time, I was the leg lock guy. Leg locks have been in jiu-jitsu for a long time.
Oh, speaking of leg locks, because I told you I was listening to your podcast, right? So one of the podcasts that you did that somebody else was interviewing you on his podcast, he introduced you as the person who invented the heel hook. Remember that one?
That was Derek Barris, who's a fantastic guy, and that was the Conspirituality podcast, which looks at the convergence of conspiracy thinking in the far left, like yoga spaces and meditation spaces, and in the far right, call it Pizzagate and QAnon, and how they kind of merged in the last few years. So I'm gonna challenge you here. You say you don't edit? Don't edit this.
Okay, I won't.
So at the time, there was big controversy over mRNA vaccines, and Robert Malone claimed to be the inventor of mRNA vaccines, and that was his Twitter bio. At the same time, he was going on Rogan and everywhere, claiming that I'm the inventor of mRNA vaccines and these aren't safe. It's clearly demonstrable that he was not the inventor of mRNA vaccines. If somebody wants to argue with me about that, they can. He was one of the many, many, many people who was involved in it. So in the same way, I had a tiny role to play in the popularization of leg locks in the jiu-jitsu space. I published dynamic knee bars back in about 2006, back when knee bars were a niche issue. And I know that that spread it a little bit. I got some nice shout outs from from a Abu Dhabi champion, ADCC champion, who got something from it. That was nice. And then I published dynamic leg locks the year after that, which covered the toe hold, the ankle lock, and the heel hook. So yes, I have a small role to play in the popularization of leg locks and heel hooks. So then as a shit take, I put, inventor of the heel hook on my Twitter bio, back when it was Twitter and back when I was on Twitter. I'm now almost entirely off of Twitter. But I thought that was just a shit talk. But Derek was interviewing me about conspiracism in the MMA space and conspiracism in the martial arts space. So he took that to its face value. So yeah, I am now officially confirmed to be the inventor of the heel hook.
Yes. Oh man, that is so funny. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, good. Well, good. Well,
how's that for a digression?
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, that's exactly why I asked that question, because when I was listening, I was like, okay, I have to.
No, I am not the inventor of the heel hook.
About that. Yeah.
I am not the inventor of the heel hook. Apparently, the heel hook was brought into. How did it go? It was taught. There's a pro wrestling connection there, and I think it was in Brazil. I think there's a way that you can track the heel hook became popular in modern MMA thanks to Japanese MMA fighters fighting in Shuto, fighting in pancrase. And a lot of those guys had their coming up through pro wrestling.
Right.
Guys like Billy Robinson, guys like Carl Gotch. No, not Carl Gotch, Frank Gotch. Carl Gotch, who were English and European pro wrestlers who then went over there. And I'm trying to remember how the heel hook, because the heel hook that we apply it now isn't really part of catch wrestling, the original catch wrestling. They use things like step over toe hold, which is very different from the toe hold that we use now. But in terms of I'm in your guard, I'm going to sit back in one of a million different ways. I'm going to swim my legs into some kind of leg lock position, and I'm going to rotate your leg using your heel as the end of the lever, either inward or outward. That wouldn't really make a lot of sense in a wrestling context, where if you get pinned, if you put your back on the ground for 3 seconds, you lose. So yeah, I've got to look up how the heel hook made it to Japan via Brazil via pro wrestling. So it's interesting because there was an era of MMA when they would put Japanese Shuto guys against Brazilian MMA guys, Brazilian Vale Tudo guys, in events like Shuto. Do you remember any of these?
Shuto.
Yeah,
I mean, I know of it, but I'm sure I've seen some footages, but cannot.
There were some amazing fighters, but the classic fight would be like they'd fight. The Brazilian guy would end up on his back. The Japanese guy would go for a heel hook. If he got the heel hook, he would win, shredding the Brazilian guy's knee. If he didn't get the heel hook, he'd give up his back, and the Brazilian guy would choke him out with a rear naked. So most of these matches ended with a Brazilian guy doing a rear naked, or the Japanese guy shredding the Brazilian guy's leg with the heel hook. So it's funny that the heel hook being deployed by Japanese fighters came from Brazil originally.
Yeah, well, so very interesting bit of history.
People are just looking for ways to win.
Yeah.
Right? It's if all of a sudden tomorrow we were in Angkor Wat and there was a stone carving of a new way to do a leg lock, do a takedown, do a wrist lock, and you thought that it worked, and we went and trained it, and we decided it worked, and then one of our students or somebody who trains with us won a tournament with it, like, we wouldn't care that it came from Angkor Wat,
right,
off of a stone tablet. Like, we'll steal from anywhere.
Yeah, good. So before the digression then, what were we talking about? The home base idea.
Okay,
Right? So
right,
let's
home base.
go back
Okay,
to that.
okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, it's not a very profound idea. It's in an average role, you go through a whole number of different positions.
Right.
And if you've really done a deep dive on some of those positions, you're going to feel much more at home. I'm going to know, okay, based on, I mean, something like the over-under passing position. If I've done a whole ton of over-under passing, I'll have answers for most of the things I'm going to see. And if I don't know the answer, I'll probably be able to figure it out, especially if you're not an expert at defeating the over-under pass. Similarly, if you can catch a near side Kimura grip, so you're on my right side and you Kimura my right arm, it's not really a finishing position, but it's a damn good controlling position. So if in this mad scramble, we can get to one of those positions where you're like, okay, this is something I've gone really deep in, you start feeling pretty good at that point. The other guy's options are less, and the options that you have are you've got a direct route to where you want to go. That's all I meant by that. It's not nothing particularly profound. It's if you can develop deep experience in specific positions by focusing on it, then you can get really good at it.
Right.
Shockingly.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, I get what you're. I think I got what you were saying. You know, when you first said it. Because the reason why I wanted you to elaborate on that is because I think that's tends to be another question a lot of beginners would be ask me, right?
What should I focus on?
It's because they feel like everything is not connected. They feel like it's constant chaos, right? And then for me, when I always tell them the same thing, right? Find those positions you're comfortable in and find different ways to get there. And it's the reason why it stood out to me when you said that. It's because even you, as somebody who's been a black belt for a long time, is still looking to get better at going back to those places. So that's why I was asking. So do you feel like that is something that you should just keep on working on and getting better and better at finding those spots, no matter what level you are?
There's a couple different answers to that. I think when you're a beginner, you're not going to have any positions that you feel comfortable in at all. And your goal when you're a beginner, it would be a mistake to bring a brand new beginner in and to just, okay, for the next 2 months, all we're going to do is triangle chokes. That's the wrong thing for a brand new person. They need to learn a little bit of close guard, a little bit maybe of the most simple open guard, a little thing of mount, a little thing of side control, a little bit of knee mount, a little bit of turtle, then how to escape from all those positions. And that there being, call it roughly 6 positions, and you can split this finer if you like: guard, side mount, knee mount, full mount, the back, and turtle. You could subdivide those if you want. Okay, well, Stephan, what about north-south? Okay, great. Instead of 6, we'll call it 7. Stephan, what about open guard versus closed guard? Okay, cool. We'll call that 8 instead of 7. More or less 6 positions.
Right.
And your job as a beginner is to learn the basics of controlling each of those positions, the basics of attacking from the dominant version of that position, and the basics of escaping. And by basics, I mean one, 2, or 3 moves. And that was the basis of the Roadmap for BJJ book that's out there for free if people want. I'm going to pimp that. grapplers.com/book. It's free.
Get it.
And your job as a beginner is kind of fill in. You've got a big empty sheet of paper, mount, side mount, knee mount, all these 6 positions. What are my 2 escapes? Or what are 3? It doesn't matter. 2, 3, 1. What are 2 or 3 attacks? Mount. Okay, I can do a cross choke in the gi, or I can do a head and arm choke, or I can do an arm bar. Yes, you're missing all the other stuff, but at least you have something that you can do. So that's your role as a beginner, and it takes a couple of months to fill that in. If you're training, call it 3 times a week, and if you have reasonable aptitude and you haven't trained before, it's going to be 2 to 3 months of filling in those basic empty boxes. And that can be a confusing time, but usually after 2 or 3 months, people click. And they can start saying, oh, this is just like that other thing I had to do. I had to move my hips there. I have to move my hips here. Oh my God. I have to not push with a straight arm on the chest when I'm in mount. I have to not push on the chest with a straight arm when I'm in knee mount. It's almost the same thing. Yeah, it is almost the same thing. So then once you've got the basics and once you've got them really well grooved, I'd say that's roughly becoming blue belt level, right? Once you're pretty decent at every position and have a couple of moves that reliably work. I don't know what your blue belt criteria are, but that's the way that I think about blue belt. Reasonably decent at each of these basic positions. Now it's maybe time to start going in a deeper dive. Okay, I keep on getting this, and people already know what they need to work on.
Right.
People keep on passing my guard. Okay, well, you need to work on something called guard retention. What are the basic movements? What are your basic guard retention strategies? There's only 4, 5, or 6 of them. There aren't that many, but now you might spend a month working on that. Now when you kind of get in that open guard, it's kind of like what I call the home base. Okay, I'm pretty confident that I can shut down this guy's guard passes and suck him into something different. And then you're like, I keep on getting a side mount, but I can't do anything there. The guy just balls up and buries his neck. Now you might spend a month drilling down into this. And if you're a student, the onus is on your instructor, but the onus is also on you. It's not like there's a shortage of information out there.
Yeah, there's almost too much.
There's almost too much. So yes, I can forgive you if you have problems deciding which of this information to follow. Curation is important, but there's information out there. You've got a training partner. If you want to, especially if you want to start working in bad positions, hey man, I got to work on my side mount escapes. Do you mind starting this round in the top of side mount on me? Everybody's going to say yes. I got to work my back escapes. Any escaping things, you won't have any problems at all finding somebody who's willing to
choke you.
Exactly. Would you mind going on my back and seeing if you can choke me?
Yo, hell yeah. I thought you would never ask.
Yeah, exactly. So I think once you're at an intermediate or an advanced level, your jiu-jitsu for the rest of your career, you should probably, as opposed to working on everything all at once, work on subsequent areas. And that might look as going to, say we're working on an esoteric aspect of leg locks. Digging for the heel from the 411 leg lock position. If you don't know what that means, look up what is the 411 leg lock position. Very powerful leg lock position. But people can hide their heel, so it's hard to finish that leg lock. This is something I'm in a little bit of a dive in right now. And there are a series of strategies and there's a series of follow-ups. And so as you become more advanced, the specificity of what you're researching and hopefully doing in your training might become more specific. That's how do I get my wrist around the guy's heel in this leg lock position when he's trying to hide it? Again, that's probably too specific for a blue belt who should be going, what is a heel hook and how do I generally avoid them?
Or it could be just the right thing for a modern day blue belt.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. My entire game is based off of the heel hook. Okay, fair.
I've met a few of those.
Yeah.
It's like any other position, I'm like, oh, feel like a white belt. But man, when he gets a heel hook, I'm like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, so maybe that was they've obviously done that deep dive and keep on doing that deep dive. And it's understandable. It's
fun.
an easy way to win matches.
Yeah.
It still is. Like there was a golden period in jiu-jitsu, call it from 2005 to 2015, when if you were a blue belt with good leg locks, you could tap out a lot of Brazilian black belts. They would murder you after.
Right.
You'd go and you'd catch them in an ankle lock, and then bing, you'd watch their eyes light up, and they would not let you get anywhere near their legs. But you could get once, maybe twice. That was kind of the easiest way to win against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. A bit harder with the American black belts because a lot of them had some exposure to the leg lock, to the sambo and stuff like that going around. But that golden era is over now. I think the idea of having somebody who's a black belt at everything but a white belt at leg locks, that's gone.
Right.
More or less.
Right.
But we haven't fully explored that aspect of jiu-jitsu yet, I don't think, because there's still innovations every day. A lot of them are junk. You know, you're throwing pasta against the wall. Some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. But it's a fascinating aspect of jiu-jitsu. It's a great arms race, and it's a little bit terrifying. I think if you're going to be working that aspect of jiu-jitsu, man, just pick somebody who's not going to reef on your leg. Like, don't get somebody who's so excited. Oh, this guy's 50 pounds bigger than me. I should really just rip this. You know, that 50-pound weight difference doesn't make a difference, really, to the size of your ACL. Your ACL might be, you know, the size of your ring finger instead of your little finger.
Yeah.
It's probably too big. But, you know, it's not that big a difference. So.
Yeah, so I guess this is a good time to then talk about like your training philosophy then, because when I interview people who are still actively competing and everything, right, their training philosophy is obviously very different. They're like, hey, you gotta find the toughest room that you can find, and then you have to train as killers, and you have to train at that intensity if you want to be world champion.
100%.
Right? So, and which is 100% true, right? Yep. But on the opposite end of it would be people like us, where like, well, we have no, I can't be a world champion, you know, not gonna happen, right? I just want to be able to train jiu-jitsu for the rest of my life, you know, more or less, and without major injuries, right? So what about you? Like, what are your training goals right now? Because you're what, 54 now,
54,
right?
yeah.
So
with certain parts of my body considerably older than 54, is really to keep on training. That's the North Star. It's not to get as good as possible as fast as possible. To get as good as possible as fast as possible, I would do what your elite competitors would do, and find the toughest room and just brawl and do specific training.
Right.
But at least some percentage of my sparring, 50% maybe, 40%, would have to be that balls to the wall, going against really tough guys, hard. Unfortunately, that comes with a much higher risk of injury, especially as you get older. And I'm not on TRT. I'm not on TRT. I'm not on GH.
we have a delivery here, so it's all good. Hello. Yeah, and this is not getting edited either. Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, our illegal drug just got delivered. So.
Oh, okay, perfect. Well, maybe today's the day that I start TRT and GH.
There you go, good.
Along with a bit of meth, and I should be good to go.
Yeah, world champion.
Yeah. Old school shoot box style training.
Supplementation.
Yeah, so my goal, if I was to try and get as good as I could, as fast as I could, there'd be one strategy for that.
Right.
And it would involve a much, much, much higher risk of injury. In part because I'm older, in part because I have a whole bunch of pre-existing injuries. So it's much easier to re-injure a body part the second time than it is to injure it the first time. So if that's not my goal, what is my goal? It's to keep on training. And it's to be able to come back to the mat in a couple of days. I trained yesterday, I'm not training today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, like to train at a sustainable rate for as long as I can. Hopefully in my 60s, 70s, and 80s.
But why?
But why? Because it's fun.
Yeah.
Ultimately because it's fun. I mean, there are different reasons that people train. Number one, for self-defense. I would hope, like, yes, I could do things that would marginally improve my ability to defend myself. But those are marginal gain. There'd be a lot of effort for marginal gain. At this point, I think I'm pretty good against most situations. I've probably done an 80-20, gotten 80% of the results that I'm going to get. self-defense, competition. Some people really like the competition. I did when I was younger. I'm not competing anymore, which leaves fun and leaves fitness. In some ways, jiu-jitsu it can be an anti-fitness activity because if you injure yourself, then you're not training and then you're getting less fit.
Yeah.
So I think, what do little kids do what do little boys, and in the case of my kids, little girls do when they get together? They roll around on the ground trying to wrestle. It's just the same thing that I do. I meet up with friends and roll around on the ground trying to choke them out.
Yeah. So I guess the next question, the logical question would be, still, why? Because if the goal is having fun and the goal is having fitness, couldn't you find something else that would be better on the body?
I don't know about fun. For fitness, I think you would achieve, certainly if you do nothing, if it's a false choice between doing nothing and doing jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu will improve your fitness more than doing nothing. I think we can agree on that.
Yes.
Because if you injure yourself and you go back to doing nothing, well, at least you were doing something for a while. So if the false choice is between doing jiu-jitsu and doing a well thought out strength and conditioning program that involves cardio and injury prehab and strength training and power training, what you do here in the downstairs part of this gym versus what you do in the upstairs part of your gym, which is the jiu-jitsu, if you had to choose just on the basis of fitness, you're probably better off lifting weights and doing cardio. But a lot of people find that dreadfully boring. So it's probably better for that. Like, people ask me, what's the best type of fitness program? It's whatever you enjoy, man. Like, let's say there's this magic, perfect routine for jiu-jitsu. It involves, and I'm making this up, Tabata sprints on the Airdyne bike, 5 sets separated by 5 minutes of rest, followed by Olympic lifting. Let's argue that Olympic lifting is the best kind of training you can do for jiu-jitsu. I actually don't think it is, but what if you don't like Tabata sprints? And what if you don't like...
Who does?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And what if you don't like Olympic lifting? What if you really like swimming or jogging? So jogging is 50% as effective as your magic Olympic lifting plus Tabata sprint protocol, but you're going to stick with it. Whereas eventually you hate the Tabata sprints and you hate the Olympic lifting so much, you're just going to stop. Maybe you do it to get ready for a tournament. Maybe you do it for 1 month before a tournament, 2 months before a tournament, and then you do nothing for the next 10 months. It's better to have been jogging, if that's what you like, for 12 months and make that consistent. So really, the best fitness stuff is the stuff that you enjoy enough to stick with it. Similarly, jiu-jitsu is so much more fun. I don't mind strength and conditioning. I find it relaxing. I don't like Tabata sprints. I find them effective.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like, locally the grouse grind or mountains like that, that I really do enjoy. So that's sustainable for me. But, the main reason I do jiu-jitsu isn't fitness. Fitness is a benefit for it. It's also, it's because it's enjoyable. It's an intellectual challenge. It's interesting for me anyway, how the hell do I expose this heel here in 411 when the guy's doing everything he can to hide it? Should I roll? Should I invert? Should I switch to a different leg position? How do I switch to that? Hey, what if I roll into a different leg position? What if I invert into a different leg position? I think about these things in the shower. For some reason, I have great jiu-jitsu ideas in the shower. And yeah, what if I did that while holding onto it? I'll have to try that. And most of the time, those ideas are crap. But once in a while, they turn out really well. I'm not saying I invented the single leg X to X guard transition, but I found it for myself. And it was actually in the shower.
No.
Man,
Wait a minute,
what
it's
if
the same hook.
What if I? Yeah, exactly, exactly. What if I moved this leg? Where could I put that? I'll have to try it, and it worked. And that was my secret weapon for a while, before I was ever taught formally.
Right.
People showed me some things to improve it. But so that's an interesting intellectual challenge, and being able to think under pressure and hang out with friends and train. That's the main reason I'm doing it now.
Okay. Yeah. So
I don't know if I answered your question.
no, yeah. I was just trying to understand, right? Because obviously I understand. That's why I'm still doing it, you know. But I think it sounds like it's the intellectual challenge and the personal challenge part that we become obsessive over, right? You know.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, because and then because as men, if we don't have some type of obsession, it's gonna be it's gonna be jiu-jitsu or it's gonna be something else, right? Yeah. And I think
hopefully you have an obsession. Hopefully you have an obsession that's semi-healthy for you.
Yeah, because I think only with obsession then it comes personal growth, right? And no matter how old you are, because I do believe that, you know, if you don't have anything obsessing over, if you have nothing you want to grow yourself as a better human being over, then you might as well be dead, you know, really. You're not far off from just being a shell of yourself. You know?
Yeah, I agree, but that's the preacher preaching to the choir, the choir preaching, like,
I know.
We both agree on this.
Oh yeah, for sure. So what's going to be more valuable is, because I know that some of you old fucks out there are listening and you're thinking about either quitting jiu-jitsu or you're thinking about starting jiu-jitsu, maybe, right?
Just be careful of who you train with.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Like what would be, because obviously you started when you were younger, right? Okay. But let's say if you are starting now, and then with everything you know already, how would you approach it?
Yeah. My advice to somebody starting jiu-jitsu later in life is to really distinguish between different kinds of gyms. So if you're considering doing this, there's going to be a big investment of time, money, energy, and you are putting your body at risk. So don't just go to one club and try it out and go, oh, okay, I think I can make it here. You owe it to yourself to visit every club that's within your radius, whether that's a 10-minute drive, 20-minute drive. Back in the day, you know, I used to drive 2 to 3 hours to go train with somebody because there were so few gyms and teachers. There's an embarrassment of riches now. So go, try out this club. Try out that club. Make notes, because you will forget. I promise you that you will forget. And you'll very quickly get a sense of like, oh, this is a competition gym. Oh, this is a belt diploma mill. This is a place that's pretty friendly. So look for other people like you. I'm not trying to drive people into their tribe, but if the entire gym is full of 20-year-old guys covered in tattoos who have a suspiciously large amounts of muscle, for guys who are doing something that's essentially aerobic all day long, translation, they're all cranking, that might not be the best gym for you at age 50. I'm just going to put an imaginary age on our gentleman. If you go to another club and there's a bunch of older people training there, well, those are all survivors of the process. Clearly there's something about how that club and that training is organized that doesn't break everybody. Consider that. I think another useful proxy thing is, are there women training at the club, especially if you're older? Because if they're just beating the crap out of everybody, there's probably less women there. So, yeah, if there's women and if there's older people, it's probably a more mellow gym. I'm making vast generalizations here, and I apologize to anyone who's offended. I'm Canadian, I've got to apologize. And yeah, that gym might not be producing world champions, but they might be producing people who are having a great time training the basics of jiu-jitsu. Don't be afraid of switching gyms. There's this culture that's inculcated, the créanche. Like if you go train at other places or you switch clubs, you're a traitor. Carlson Gracie did many good things. Bringing the word créanche into jiu-jitsu was not one of them. And this idea that you're a traitor to somebody. If you go to McGill University and you do the first half of your economics degree at McGill, and then you transfer and you go to, I don't know, University of Western Washington, and you finish the second part of your economics degree, you're not a traitor. University of Western Washington isn't going, oh, you cannot come here.
They don't give a shit.
Yeah, McGill's not saying you can never come back. Never come back into Montreal or we'll find you and kick the shit out of you. You're paying for a service. You're paying somebody to teach you. You have the right to go where you want and find a place that's a good match.
Yeah.
So shop around, find a place that looks like it's mellow. If you're older, I would suggest avoiding takedowns. That sucks, but as we talked about right at the very beginning, the rate of injury per hour of training takedowns is so much higher than the rate of injury per hour of training almost anything else in jiu-jitsu. So don't do takedowns.
Yeah.
Or,
So how do I avoid that? Because most gyms are gonna have some type of takedown, maybe even a class once in a while that will have. How do they communicate with their professors or whoever to minimize the?
I'm old. I've got a bunch of injuries. If I was to, ask during the initial thing, if I want to sit out on takedowns, say, because I'm old, is that okay? It should be okay. Like if you're not joining the Manson cult here, where you or the guy went down to Guyana, the evangelical preacher who lost his, Jim Jones.
Oh, all right, cool. Yeah.
He wasn't evangelical, still a preacher. When where you had to do everything, you must do this. You don't must do this.
Right. Would you suggest that they still drill it, or
I think drilling takes.
Just don't do it live?
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying don't not do it. I'm just saying recognize that the chance of injury is higher.
And then make your own decision.
Make your own decision.
On the risk-reward ratio.
Exactly. And there are more and less dangerous ways to train takedowns. Live sparring with a 20-year-old who's getting ready for his MMA debut is not the safest way.
Just pull guard.
I think I'm fairly confident in saying that is, of all the different ways of training, that is along towards the not so safe end of things. Safer would be just drilling it, or you can actually make a fair amount of progress with takedowns just by drilling hand fighting. Because if you don't have a good control of the grips, the odds of you being able to penetrate in and get, whether you want an underhook, an overhook, a body lock, a double leg, a single leg, a high crotch, whatever, good luck if you're not controlling, being able to control grips, especially as you're older. I mean, if you're young, you could shoot from 15 feet away in a low single and a across the mat and catch a heel. Okay, cool. Welcome to being 20 years old. As you get older, your wrestling's going to start looking a lot more like Greco and a lot more clinching and a lot more. But don't underestimate the danger of that. If you and I are both clinched up and we hook our legs together and go falling over, and I can't, get my arm into a safe position, or it's held in a weird position, like that's a whole lot of energy you can build up.
Yeah.
It's just something I've been thinking a lot about, is the risk to reward ratio of training takedowns. I think everybody should know how to do a basic double leg. I think everybody should know how to do a basic sacrifice throw. I think those are towards the safer end of things. Suplexes, not so much.
It's good for highlight reels, though.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say that many of the entangling legs throws, like Uchimadas and Haragoshs, and even things like Osotogaris, they're effective, but anytime you end up entangled and then like moving across space, especially with the gi makes it way worse, because now there's so many ways to get wrapped up in this damn thing that you can't land safely. So I don't know if the injury rate of judo is higher than wrestling, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. My hypothesis is that judo would have a higher injury rate.
Yes, because more old people are doing it. Maybe.
That's true. That's possibly true.
Yeah.
Also, higher amplitude throws are more rewarded. If I do a little trip and you kind of like tumble down to the ground on your side, I get a, at best a wazari, not a full point. But if I pick you up and slam you ass over tea kettle and boom through the air, I win.
Yeah, match is over.
Yeah, match is over.
Yeah,
So
nice.
I've attended more judo tournaments than wrestling tournaments, but an awful lot of ambulances went to the the hospital at every judo tournament.
Yeah. Wow. It goes better. Best be insured.
Yeah. Well, for our American listeners, yeah, make sure you're insured. Yeah. So if you're older, pick a good club. Number one, pick reasonable training partners. Pick a club where, if you can, say, man, I don't want to train with this guy. Like, if you have to train with somebody, there's always going to be that guy. And if you can avoid training with that guy who just happens to neck crank everybody that he's training with in the name of doing some other choke, he's going to bugger your neck up. So if you have some control over who you can train with, that's good. If you can do a little bit of additional physical conditioning, especially weightlifting as you get older, that's good. Increase your bone density, increase the strength of your connective tissue, increase the strength of your muscles. It's not really about being stronger, it's about being harder to injure. Of course, you can injure yourself with weight training as well, as I'm sure
Oh, yeah,
you've
happens. It does happen, yeah.
But hopefully it's not catastrophic. What else?
Only if you're doing CrossFit. No.
Yeah. Oh, you do CrossFit? Yeah. I did a clean and jerk practice to max.
For time.
Yeah, for time. It's been argued that CrossFit has gotten safer than it used to be. Which
I'm sure, because they're probably dealing with a bunch of lawsuits or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But man, it was insane. For a while, every jiu-jitsu guy I trained with was doing CrossFit. And every person I knew who was doing CrossFit had injured wrists. I guess they'd just gone to the online workout of the day. Had all been, had a whole lot of clean and jerks. And people don't know how to, or cleans, I think just cleans. So people were cleaning, and I can't clean properly, but I know that I can't clean. I don't have the flexibility to, or maybe I could, but it would be a ton of work to get there. But you do not clean like this, especially once you're getting to, above a plate aside. I think I cleaned 225 once, and I was catching it like this, and that's a whole lot of stress on the wrist.
For sure.
So I was an idiot.
Yeah, that's the anti-wrist lock training.
Yeah, exactly. I'm invincible.
All right, cool.
Well, most wrist locks in judo and most wrist locks in jiu-jitsu end up being gooseneck.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We got to do the old school kung fu push-ups on the back of our wrists.
Yeah, I knew there's a method to the madness. Yeah.
Plyometrics. Plyometric jumps onto the back of the wrist. Clearly, that would just not break you, makes you stronger.
I know we're kind of
That's a
joking, but
joke.
we're kind of joking, but just making sure people know, so you're not like trying to do plyometric.
Really?
Push ups
Really?
on your wrist.
Well, that's natural selection. If you believe everything I say, you're an idiot.
Nice. All right, cool. So dude, that's like an hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So, is there anything you would like to plug before we end the conversation?
Well, if you're new to jiu-jitsu, I'd suggest grabbing the Roadmap for BJJ book, grapplers.com/book.
And, did you say it's free?
Yeah.
That book? Yeah, it's free. So go and get it.
If you have a little bit of experience in jiu-jitsu, maybe grab the Grapple Arts BJJ Master app. It's got all my instructionals on it and the instructions I've worked on with other people. Topical of today's topic. That's a terrible sentence. Topically, it would include the BJJ for old farts or old fucks, depending on how you read that spelling, that I did with Rob Bernacki, which is trying to take an 80-20 analysis of the techniques that are still very effective, but are less risky than other techniques. So trying to really cherry pick the stuff that requires the least movement and the least flexibility and the least dynamism. So I think that's a very good series. I've gotten great feedback on that.
It sounds like it's not just for old fucks then, eh? It's really for people who want to play a more efficient game.
But when you're young, you don't need to be efficient.
Well, better. I mean, you're gonna have to. You're
still work for
gonna
you if you're
have
young.
to.
Yeah.
At some point, right? Because I think I heard one of the Gracies said something like, "You don't want to have to learn jiu-jitsu twice," right?
You're always learning jiu-jitsu twice because jiu-jitsu is changing. I don't know. It depends on which Gracie, but a large chunk of the Gracie family is very invested in the idea that there is this magical jiu-jitsu codified, probably by Helio, probably in some course that they sell. And this is the magic way to do the jiu-jitsu. But I'm going to argue it's changing all the time.
Right.
And that new techniques, new strategies, new training methods are coming into the sport all the time. And it's like saying the medicine. What are we talking? 18th century medicine, where we're like leeches and bleeding and
Bloodletting, it's not going to cure you.
You got a shot in the wrist. Okay, we need to amputate your arm. We got a shot in the leg. We need to cut it off at the thigh. No. I'll go with more modern. Can we move to like late 20th century, early 21st century medicine, please? It's just like saying the medicine versus the jiu-jitsu. These are moving targets. These are changing all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. There you go. So go check out the what is it, Grapple Arts?
Grapple Arts BJ. If you search Grapple Arts in the App Store, you'll find it.
Cool. And it's built in on Apple and Android,
It
right?
is.
There you go. Good. There you go. Go ahead and do that. And if people want to follow you, where's the best place to
I'm all over social media. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Threads. I'm on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. They want to find me, they can.
Just not on X.
Yeah.
So there you go. Thank you so much, Stephan.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming by. And just like that, we'll see you next time.